The idea here is they're just asking like what's going to attract people to the Hex ecosystem and what's going to lead to the price being pushed up specifically in Hex and Pulsechain, the whole ecosystem.
I'll take a little bit of it. I mean, I think it's mostly going to be, people making gains. So price go up. I mean, that's going to be the big one. But I think the other one I think a lot of people are missing is just the aspect of cypherpunk. Like you're just not going to get the same kind of ecosystem in some of these older chains. It's just become so centralized. I'm not saying that we aren't a centralized chain too, but I just think the ethos of our chain is really, in my opinion, more cypherpunk, or, we can't be shut down. Like we have just as good of technology as anyone else. And it's designed in such a way where, you really own your destiny.
Ash, let me ask you a little bit about that though, because like what you had said is something I agree with, and I hear it all the time. But I know like probably the new person is thinking an additional question from it. So we say that we get green candles, and they bring about more green candles. When the price goes up, that attracts people in, and they push the price up higher. But what do you think though is going to be? I mean, it kind of sounds like a catch-22 almost. So like, what do you think is going to be the first snowflake to build up the avalanche that comes later?
Oh, for sure, it's the money printer. I mean, I know that's probably what you're looking for, but yeah, I think that's, clearly people have to have more disposable money to put into the ecosystem. They're not going to just throw their grocery money, they need to eat.
Yeah, I totally would agree that the money printer, I think, will be a catalyst for crypto as a whole. Anybody want to speak to that, like on what they think will be the catalyst either to crypto or even specifically to Hex and Pulse Chain? Anybody got anything on that?
I think it just started recently with the SAC fund move. I think he saw alt season getting ready to gear up. Q4's ending here. It'd probably be an extended cycle into the next 3 quarters. So like, yeah, I think we're just gonna start seeing some big moves now.
Yeah, could be that. I mean, I'll tell you what I think is like first, Ethereum has got to run first. Because like with Ethereum being so suppressed now, I see so many other coins that are just kind of following what Ethereum does and is being so suppressed. But like when Ethereum is doing great, and then when we know that like the Pulse Chain treasury is in very big profit, then I think that that's going to create a lot of buzz around the entire Pulse Chain ecosystem. But also, I think it's just hard for other altcoins to have their runs when the number one altcoin is underperforming so badly.
Makes sense. I mean, I think the founder himself has even said leverage play on Ethereum, right? I mean, those are his own words. So, yeah.
So, Giga, if Richard Hart is setting up Hex for another 10,000x again, how would he pull it off?
It's a different set of circumstances. You can't really say, right? Like, well, just to be clear, right? Like, I don't think we get a 10,000. I don't want it on anyone's parade, but I do think we do really well here. Now what that number is, I don't know, and I don't like to make those estimates. But I think the important point, I guess, it was kind of mentioned with like the catalyst question, which is like what brings about the green candles, why Pulse Chain, why Hex. I think Hex, why Hex, why Pulse X, why all of the cores is a question of like why Pulse. And then I think you can kind of boil that down. We discussed it a little bit earlier on a different space, but you just kind of have to ask yourself is like if you had someone serious, a serious investor in front of you, and you only had 1 minute to pitch like why he should buy Pulse Chain, then you could just say like do you want to be on the thing that has an off button, or do you want to be on the thing where like I said earlier is basically what I said was the litmus test for if if a chain is good or not is if you stole $100 million right now from a protocol. If you had it in your wallet, are you able to move it around, or is it going to get like seized? And I go, that's not going to happen on Pulse Chain. It can't happen on Pulse Chain. And the only other place I know that can happen is Ethereum, and you have to hold Ethereum. But guess what? Like every other single DApp protocol, whatever contract on Ethereum has some sort of connection to you know, a group or organization that has some kind of funding from, you know, financial interests or government interests, basically your money's getting taken if it goes anywhere but stays in your wallet. And like you can use mixing protocols, and there's things you can do to mix that money around. But you know, Pulse Chain's one thing that it has going for it is like it's like decentralized in the ways that are good. And you know, a lot of people might disagree with this, but it's sort of centralized in a lot of ways that are good too. In that, you know, if we saw, let's say, Richard, we would see him spinning up, you know, tens of thousands of validators, for instance, if he wanted to intervene with something that happened on the chain, which is like the probability of that is so astronomically low. It's like, do you really think he cares if some protocol got hacked and the people are keeping their money on Pulse Chain? And I just go like that's the comforting part to me. Like you have a system that's designed around people and not the financial interests of a group. So I think that in itself is like enough. I don't know. I don't really know how to articulate this well yet because I've been still trying to think about this. Like how do I
Yeah.
sell this? But because obviously like I have a belief in Richard, and in trying to articulate like the nuance behind why that is just like retarded to try to do to any outsider. You sound like an autist. So I just go like it's better for me to try to like come up with a better explanation of like why I would trust him and without using him. Like not actually saying his name, but saying like, you know, why I'm here.
And I think also the track record, right? I mean, it's one thing to have all the centralization of the OA and having all this large amounts of coins in, you know, some entity's hands, but it's like another thing that it's always done benevolent actions, right? So we've never seen it dumping or selling or causing, you know, negativity in the ecosystem from what I can gather. So I mean, I think that's a huge factor that it, you know, people just have to be aware of, right? I mean, we obviously are going to have people who trade and do all kinds of crazy games and, you know, all that, but we have a decent level of benevolency in the largest hands. So, you know, I like
Well,
that.
someone said to me is like the sorry, Royce, and I know you had your hand up. Is like you have like a little bit of centralization in the parts that are actually like where you kind of want it. Like you want everyone in crypto would like a really big whale to buy up a bunch of their supply and not sell it, right? So if you want to call that centralization, then we actually have a little bit of that, right? And then at the same part is like the infrastructure of our chain is completely decentralized. So you kind of like get a little bit of both worlds that are good, and like finding a way, I guess, to explain that is what I've been trying to come up with in a way that's like, you know, graceful, I guess.
Yeah, to your main question of like how do we 10,000x again? I think it's possible, but there's two ways it's possible. One is you just 10,000x and you go right back down, similar to like the first cycle. So what I'm thinking, and to add to like Giga's point, like I think if you sorry, hold on. Like if you team up with like other cypherpunks, because that's really what Pulse Chain is. It's DeFi, right? Sorry, I'm insisting she goes on my back. Okay. So yeah, I think you get your 10,000x, but you do that partnering with other people with the same like vision for crypto, and then we can sustain a better pump instead of just like rotating stack funds and then like we exit until the next bear.
I think as far as like what's going to keep it pushing the price up when the money comes in is just the fact that there's so little liquidity in these tokens. There's so little of these tokens available to buy. Like, you know, we mentioned earlier, 330 million hex available for sale and 330 billion Pulsex, which is a low number for Pulsex, I think, that's available to buy. And just a little over 1.5 million in the incentive token that's available. And when you are got more money coming in and it's all fighting over very few tokens, I mean, it just, when you understand how like the trading pools work and everything, that is going to be pushing the prices up, making like those great big daily doubling candles and everything. And I think that the big chunk of like why the moves made with the origin address recently, I mean, there was multiple reasons for staking all the hex and like reducing the liquidity in all these tokens, but I think this was a big reason why, is that now it takes very little money to move those price charts. And once you get it started, that is going to attract more eyeballs that are going to want to participate in that and keep it going. And to Giga's point, but kind of getting at earlier about privacy, I mean, I think we also got a privacy edge in Pulsechain for a couple of reasons. Like, we got very low barriers to entry for privacy tools, I think, because of our low fees and everything and fast speeds. It'll make it easier for people to use privacy enhancing tools that would otherwise be expensive to use on other chains like Ethereum, like if I wanted to use a Mixer or ZK proofs. And what I also think is that for privacy as well, we have less, since we don't have institutions like playing on the chain, like say Solana and Sui does, that's a lot less pressure to compromise the ideals of privacy on this chain. Because, you know, these big institutions, they want to know everything about who they're playing with, and they want to get a bunch of information on people. We'd probably see a lot less. We wouldn't see any of that on Pulsechain just because there aren't any institutions playing on that. And like, well, we want the institutional money, yes, but we don't want institutional influence over like how the chain is governed and everything. Royston, is that a new hand up from you there?
Oh, no. No, I'm good.
Okay. And I don't think like the privacy edge itself really does too much for the price, because if what I've just seen is like technology and utility, usefulness, and like anything that's like really good about the use of it, I've not really seen that be a positive for the price. What I've come to realize and learn the hard way is what Richard calls the pumpamentals, the things about the token's liquidity and how it trades, the game theory and everything. That's more what it
I can
does
intervene
for
a
the
little
price.
bit here because the pumpamentals of this cycle are gearing up rapidly to approach privacy edge. So like what a lot of people don't understand is that ZK is a massive building narrative right now, and privacy tech is a massive building narrative right now. And we don't have specifically a whole ton of privacy tools on Pulsechain specifically, but the intention of those tools in the first place is to obfuscate funds. So and what I'm saying is you have basically a free playground over here where you don't have to worry about any type of external interests trying to, you know, exert their will on your money. And, you know, there was another point to this that I was going to make and I just totally forgot it.
Well, can I add
You
on to
think the
that?
privacy will be an attraction to Pulsechain, though?
Well, like governments, right? You see around the world in like UK and even the US, government overreach. And as soon as they really start to lose rights, I think that's when Pulsechain gets really, really like an actual potential outlet for them.
You know
So
what?
as that gets worse, and it seems like that's where we're heading,
Yeah.
I think Pulsechain will get more attractive.
You,
Yeah,
you know what? Yeah, you know what? I agree with you now. I agree with you now because I'm just thinking, yeah, you know, what's going on in the Eurozone is they may start introducing capital controls. So, like, you know, now this makes a lot more sense to me. Go ahead, Giga.
yeah, no, I was just you can look at what all of the top developers in the world in the crypto space are talking about right now. They're talking about the zero knowledge tech basically exclusively. The only other shit that's being talked about is all of the what I would say is like the more corporate type of crypto chains, which like obviously there's opportunity, but there's opportunity in different ways. It's just I think one kind of thing I was trying to explain earlier today in a tweet was like, you know, the what crypto became, what people didn't realize was is you had like large caps, then you had small caps. Like a lot of people started rotating into Doge and Litecoin and other things, and then you had the, you know, things like meme coins come up, and then people, you know, all of us knew that, all of us knew and saw the hype and the potential and the gains that were made with different meme coins. So then the new product was to sell you a tool to make you meme coins, right? So then you saw things like Pump Fund and things like this. And I think that what's going to happen is you'll have, because all of that's delusion. So eventually you kind of revert back to the original intention of what the thing was designed for, which was basically like self-sovereignty, kind of, you know, trustless interactions and peer-to-peer. I'll say peer-to-peer. And I think that that's where we're hitting. I think we've already hit the end point of like extractable kind of value in that sense, where it's like, okay, we've already made the product. We've already, everyone's already seen where the money's to be made. Everyone's chasing the money to be made, but it's like, how much further can you go? There really isn't, other than, the government's using blockchain like settlement layers, I guess, like for stable coins and stuff, or back to peer-to-peer worlds. So I think it's really simple in that our time hasn't come yet. I think our time will come. I think that Pulsechain has the infrastructure there to support that peer-to-peer trustless activity again. And I don't want to get too like, I don't like getting caught up on all the nuances of it, because the only people who give a remote fuck about any of that is the people basically in this space. And I go like, I feel like we talk so much about it that I would rather focus like all the energy that we spend talking about like the nuances of hex like stakes or things, just basically saying like, hey, we're over here, and you can't stop us,
And I think
because it's
that
like
could
a
be,
cult.
yeah.
I don't I don't know how else better to explain it. I did say this earlier in a different group, but I was like, if I'm trying to get you to join my religion, my ideology, right, which is that like I should be able to transact and behave how I want on this network. I should be able to trade money to Tam. I should be able to trade money to Roy without anyone stopping me or ever being able to intervene. Then like, if that's my religion and that's my cult, I'm not going to get you on board by like saying, hey, join my cult, which is what I feel like so much of what I see in the community is. Instead, you should say like, the Amazon Web Service down the outage was like the perfect opportunity. And I saw so few people shilling Pulse Chain. But, there was a large group of Bitcoin maxis that were basically shit talking Ethereum, because their primary RPC that most wallets use by default and stuff was hosted on Amazon Web Servers. And so the main like wallet that, the main RPC that a lot of these wallets used went down, but Ethereum never went down, just to be clear. And you could have connected to Ethereum in a million different ways. And what I finally saw after years of waiting was this stir amongst the Ethereum community, who was starting to come out of the woodworks. It was like, no one's ever shut down Ethereum. Ethereum's run flawlessly. You just needed to use a different RPC, buddy. And we've already seen Richard tell us this several times in tweets. And I go like, why don't I see every hexagon on every single AWS outage tweet shilling like, look at our shit, not our, none of our front ends even went down because they're all on IPFS. Our RPCs are all solid, not a single issue. Like, and I feel like I saw so few guys. Like, that's the opportunity to sell what you have, because you have the thing that didn't break.
Yeah,
You're onto something
agreed.
right there with that. Yeah, I mean, like when it comes to like your analogy of religion and cult here, what's going to get people to really open their minds and open their eyes to it is experiencing some kind of trauma or bad events. Like a near-death experience. And when you have a near-death experience, everybody's interested in getting religious. Then
Well, yeah. Well,
And-
what I was gonna say is that's like my bridge was maybe really unclear, but that's why I bridged into the AWS stuff, is because it's like, instead of saying like, oh, hey, look, we have this and this, and our founder's amazing, and we have this and this. I go like, hey, look, we simply just didn't break because we're doing things the right way, And then you get them in on the cult, like, oh, hey, like, Richard does all this, and like he does all this other stuff too, and he's done this, that was kind of my point.
Yeah, we had some other opportunities to do that too, like that big liquidation Friday where like Ethereum got so congested it was unusable because the fees spiked up so high. Not only did like we not go down that much in price, we only went down like 5% while everybody else was down double digits, but our fees stayed the same, and that was like the first like bragging point we had in a long time, or like the first point where we have something to be proud of here in Pulse Chain. But I think many of the opportunities like that are going to be coming, because like when you just look at the situation in France and how they're losing 200 billion euros a month in capital flight, and there's talk of Brussels having to introduce capital controls all throughout the Eurozone, well, then I think that the borderless money narrative that crypto easily fulfills is something that will be talked about a lot more. And when you're talking about that narrative and just like how much easier it is to move through our chain because of low fees, easier to do things. And to your point earlier, you could throw $10,000 or $100,000 onto the chain and not worry about it getting confiscated or tracked or hunted down like a dog,
You could put 100 million USDC onto the bridge and they can't actually freeze your money. They would have to freeze the entire bridge. So like even that, you're protected by the numbers, because then they would risk getting sued by basically the entirety of the Pulse chain community if they froze that bridge. And then so they wouldn't do it. It's like the probability of them doing that is so low. So like even just putting actual stable coins that are not decentralized in any way into the bridge and then getting your little IOU copy is even better than having it on Ethereum, because you can actually hold those stables over here where you can on Ethereum. You seriously run the risk of those coins getting frozen. So I have a lot of faith in that. The operation of that bridge is like that's like the church, because that has all of that value that's on there is basically protected by one another, by all of us and all of our money that's been bridged in. And it's done so in a way that's decentralized as it can be.
I think that we're going to have a lot of opportunities coming up in the future to like be able to articulate the value of that. I think there'll be a lot of chances for us to do that.
Was talking about in respect to the religion and the AWS, and using that as an example of something that didn't happen on Pulse Chain. If you guys are out there trying to explain reasons why people should be interested in Pulse Chain, the first thing that you have to identify is like, what are the pain points of the person that I'm talking to, or like what are potential problems that they have that this technology solves? Not necessarily like the data and the statistics and the facts and everything, or the things that you necessarily think are interesting, but if you're looking at this as like a sales prospect, then you have to think of what is the sales pitch that I'm giving the other person. The other person has a problem, I have a solution using these tools, using these protocols and things, and how do I tailor my definition of what all this stuff is into their own little world and their perspective and everything. So that's all I wanted to throw out there.
Yeah, I articulated poorly because I've been talking on Spaces like for 24 hours now, but it's exactly right. It's like when I'm trying to use the call reference, it's basically saying like there's a lot I believe in, Richard, but trying to explain that to someone's going to make me look like a lunatic. And I'm basically saying like, oh, you got a flat tire? Well, I actually have a tire right here. And I think that that's the best approach for right now. I think that building a good, solid just growth in that way is best, and those people will discover all the nuances of the chain naturally. So
No, you made some really great points. And I know some people are uncomfortable with the OA and Richard owning so much of the supply, but that's actually why I'm all in Hex, because I find so much peace of mind. I've already seen what his diamond hands are, and I find so much more trust in my money being in Hex than really any other investment vehicle, even when we're down 99%, like, because I understand what it is, who's behind it, and what our goals are. And like you were saying, no one can really stop us. We can't get our funds frozen or, get scammed. I mean, as long as we're following the right security protocols, we're as safe can be, in my opinion. People don't realize how important that is until they've been scammed or they've had their money frozen, and you realize that you have no power. Even if it's your money and you have good justifiable reason to your funds, you lose the power when you have counterparty risk. And I think the more people end up learning that the hard way, the more they're going to find themselves to better solutions, and we're going to be here for them. We just need to have our ducks in a row and quit fighting against each other and remember that we're all on the same team and we all have the same common goal. And I think we just have to focus on education and not out talking ourselves. We've all got to get better about that. And we will, because we do have the best of the best in here. And we're all, most of us are committed for 10 to 15 years. So I think we are going to get better and better.
Yeah, I'm actually motivated.
Well, in so many other areas of crypto, people just don't realize that you can end up begging middlemen, where in certain cryptos, you don't have as much of that next negative externality risk. So, it's obviously you have to meet people where they're at, but yeah, you have to also just, relay the information, the facts, right? That, this is a chain where you are more empowered to have your own accountability and, manage things yourself. Whereas in many other pieces of crypto, it's really just trying to get you into the meat grinder. And, that's a large reason why I'm even in Pulsechain and Hex, is to try to get away from that. And I think a lot of people fell into many of those traps early on in their crypto experience. And then they oftentimes come to Hex and realize, like, maybe the price doesn't look amazing, but, it's true to its core and it's factual information that it will empower you to have control over your crypto assets through your private key. So, that part is just a huge aspect for me. I mean, and you just think about, like, the world today, right? I mean, with just that capability alone, that you could literally just hop on an airplane, go to whatever country you want, and your crypto can go along with you with really no risk, as long as you know your key. I'm not suggesting like anything illegal, but I'm just saying you have that capability, and so you have that empowerment by just being part of the chain and
Bro,
having your key.
can you memorize 12 or 24 words? It's like, congrats, you now have your own traveling bank account, that you don't need
Exactly.
anything for, bro. Um,
Yep.
this, yeah,
So much for the $10,000 of value that you can take on a plane, right? It's like cash can only take you so far. Bank accounts, oh, I got to beg them to wire money. I only am insured for $250,000 no matter if I have more than that in my bank account. Like, these are things I don't think people really realize, right? Whereas in crypto, it's like, it's very volatile, but, maybe in the future it might look a lot different, right?
Yeah, but I feel like everything has cycles, regardless of what type of investment you're in. And people always say that real estate is like the safest vehicle to park your money. And maybe I've just had, bad experiences. But I mean, when COVID hit, I had two homes that neither one of the tenants were paying rent for almost a year. So I had to cover the mortgages on both of those houses at the same time, and legally I couldn't do anything about it. And then one year I had an AC go out, a water heater go out. I had to pay like $24,000 that I had to come up with right then and there. So you always have to have, a savings account just for those investments, because you don't ever know what's going to come up. Or I mean, I've just had crazy things like one of my tenants trashed my house and there was like $15,000 worth of damage. She filed bankruptcy. I couldn't go after her for anything. One house I had, there were all these snakes that kept getting in the house. No one could figure out how the snakes were getting in there. But the tenant had a newborn baby in a crib. And I was paranoid that the snake was going to get in the baby's crib and kill the baby. And that's also a liability. Or in the wintertime, when the pipes would freeze here in Texas, because the way that our homes are built here, it's very common to have pipes bust. And I was always paranoid, like, hey, are my tenants going to remember to put the little protector on the hoses outside, because they don't really care, they don't own the house. It's not their liability. And once I sold my rental properties and put it in Hex, even though, yes, I'm down, I'm still earning yield every single day. And I don't have any of that liability. I don't have to worry about coming up with money last second for this or for that, or getting sued, or a baby dying, or I don't have any of those to worry about. Another property that I had, there was oil fracking going on in Texas. And when I bought the house, I didn't realize it was a concern, but there was a big oil container in the back. And there was all this new stuff going on how bad it was for the health. And I'm like, oh my God, am I going to get stuck with this house? And no one's going to want to buy it because now it's all over the internet that it's bad for your health. Or am I going to get sued by the tenant because they get cancer and it's my fault because I didn't do something right? Like, there's all this other liability in any other investment. But for me, Hex has been the one that I sleep the soundest at night. And it's because I know Richard Hart is in it to make the world a better place. He's not in it to scam people. He's never abandoned us. He hired 7 of the best attorney firms to make sure that we beat the SEC. That man has sacrificed more than any of us have. I don't think he's seen his mother in years. I mean, really, he's a billionaire. He could go out and live this billionaire lifestyle. We were told that he was living on top of a sandwich shop because
Yeah,
he,
real estate. Sounds like a lot of negative externalities in real estate.
but yes, I mean, and the other thing is, when I bought two of these houses, it took 10 years for them to double in value. So when I hear people crying over Hex right now, it's been 5 years, but it's not about the timeline. It's really about zooming out and saying, okay, do I want to, or even in the S&P 500, right? Like, most people, they're happy just to double their money every 7 years in the S&P 500, okay? Well, if you can just get a 10x in 10 years with Hex, that's life changing for most families. And I obviously think we're going to get more than a 10x. But I'm saying, where else can you go with your investment and do something legally, and that you're not having to risk your life or do something that's just taking advantage of other people?
Yep, makes
I
sense.
think
And I think that the other thing is also just, the metrics, right? Like on a daily basis, we're little by little adding more and more holders. So it's like even in the deepest of bear markets and just, well, I shouldn't say everything's a bear market, but even throughout this entire period of price action, right? We're still adding new users. And so, I mean, there is positives. You just have to look and dig into the research and, I think you'll find a lot of positives, to be honest.
Well, and
And
actually,
I, and I
if you look at my situation, okay, I bought Hex at the top from 14 to 46 cents with my 401k. Then I went in and I sold my 2 rental properties and I bought the top of EHEX, right, at 0.0096. And people say, oh, you would have been better off if you had bought Bitcoin or you had bought Ethereum or you bought this or you bought that. But that's not true at all, because when I look at my stakes and I see the yield that I've earned, to be honest, I have earned a quarter of my principal. And my plan this cycle is to sell a quarter of my holdings and let the rest ride. So because I played my hand this way and I didn't go and play my hand in any other token, now I don't have to sell my principal. Whereas people that invested in Bitcoin or they invested in Ethereum or something else, they're going to have to sell their principal. They didn't earn the yield like I did. So I get laughed at all the time, but I am so confident on my hand. And I do believe, actually, that Hex will hit another 10,000x. I don't need a 10,000x, but I want it to hit a 10,000x. And I'm going to do everything that I can to help him achieve that, because I believe he deserves the recognition. I think he's worked really hard for all of us to make a difference in our lives. And I believe that man does deserve appreciation. I want to help him win the Nobel Prize, not because the Nobel Prize is important to me, but because it's important to him. And so therefore it is important to me. I believe that if we help our founder shine, then we're going to see the best that we've ever seen in him. If we help give him the right nutrition and build that man up, I think we haven't even seen anything yet. But what I can tell you is no one has ever inspired me to be the best version of myself and give me the confidence to know that it's within my own ability. I mean, I'm a single mom with 2 kids. I don't have any child support. I don't ever worry about money. I'm working 6 days a week. I drive a $500 car. I haven't been on vacation and I can't tell you when, but I am the happiest I've ever been in my life. I have the best relationship with my children. I cook with them every night. I'm really immersed in our community because I believe that we're all growing together to make this world a better place. I believe that the best hasn't even started yet, but we had to go through this together to really appreciate what life is all about, because 5 years ago, if I had just got a 10,000x, I would have been lost because I don't think I would have spent that money wisely. I needed to go through this hardship to really value what that really means, right? I used to think I want a new house, a brand new car, I want this, I want that. Do you know that none of that matters to me anymore? I mean, I'll probably get a new car. But I just don't care about any of those materialistic things anymore because I realize that it's in the simple things, right? It's in the simple things of our connections, our loved ones. I like that my kids are seeing the struggle
And not only that,
because it's brought us all closer, you know? And I think it's brought our community closer, like the ones that are really here for the right reasons. I believe we really are going to make a big impact in this world somehow. And it feels good and it gives you something to look forward to. And it's not about the money for me. It really isn't. I thought it was. And don't get me wrong, it's nice to know that your family's taken care of, right? That you don't have to worry about, you know, the health costs or your living expenses or to put food on the table. Yes, all of that is important. But to really make a difference in other people's lives, this is the first time that I have truly had the right tools to make a difference in people's lives. At work, I'm selling night guards. I do deep cleanings. We do periodontal surgeries. We implant titanium in people's mouths. But a lot of those problems would be solved if we can just help people with their finances, fight against inflation. That is the silent killer. And these tools, what Richard Hart has created, they give us the best defense to do that. And there's not a single person that I know that wouldn't benefit from these assets. They just don't know about them yet. And I believe that our convents are going to keep building and the word is going to get out. And when someone asks, well, where do I see this long term? I believe we're going to be number one brand. I believe we are going to go to the top. I believe we have the opportunity to flip Ethereum and Bitcoin. Again, do I have these expectations? No, but they are good, healthy goals. And why can't we? Why can't we? Seriously.
I can tell you, I rode the 10,000x all the way, and I'm still here. So if that tells you anything, I mean, it's kind of, to see some of those astronomical numbers. It's just it gives you a level of like, okay, I know it's possible. So why not get it again, right? I mean, and not only that, a lot of it, most of us who were early, if you truly were in the system and staked, you couldn't sell that, right? So you were sitting there looking at these gigantic numbers that you couldn't sell. So you had to stick to your conviction. I mean, you could obviously early unstake, but if you made an agreement with yourself that you're going to stick to the contract, then that is what it is, right? And if you don't, well, you're penalized. So, and that goes back to the people that stick with it. So it's a reflexive system. And, you either commit to it and stick with it or, you get penalized.
Well, I'm
Just
just excited to be here.
I wanted to mention as a recommendation for next week, maybe we can go into Richard and demystify some of the cultiness because I think that would be interesting to understand why everyone has such strong opinions here and the belief system. And I know it was suggested to read Sci-Vive, but I would love to hear your stories.
Absolutely, that's a great suggestion. Yeah, let's do a deep dive on Richard Hart himself next week.
And Kim, did you end up watching the highest of stakes? I was just curious if anyone asked you that yet.
Yes, I did watch it about a week after I got the tablet, and it did help me get my bearings on like the terminology, which was great. But I feel like it didn't really go deep into the meat and potatoes. So
Gotcha.
maybe
Yeah.
part two.
Yeah, there's a lot of history to this community, honestly, but I don't want to overcomplicate things either.
I
could I
really
suggest something?
enjoy
I
the
would.
feedback, Kim. And yes, absolutely, please speak.
Yeah, sorry. Just for Kim, if you're what it sounds like is you're new to the community. So what I would suggest personally is watch some old debates of Richard Hart on Hex. A lot of those ones where there's some complicated ones where the terms are a little bit more complicated, but there are a lot that are very pretty straightforward in regards to what Hex is and a lot of things about Bitcoin too. And just to touch on what Ash was saying earlier, when it comes to like from just so you guys understand my perspective, I got into crypto about 2.5 years ago, I'd say. And when I got onboarded, I was right. I got onboarded straight to Hex and the Pulsechain ecosystem. And I bought that like top in March of 2024, I believe. And I saw that shit just crashing down. And obviously, like I was new to crypto. I'm like, what the hell is going on? But who I got onboarded by and like what they were saying compared to the community was very aligned. You have to look at it for the long term, right? There's Hex like the functionality of Hex and how it works is that long-term gratification, things that Richard Hart was talking about, and that is mainly the reason why I stuck through and I held and I grow more confident as I learn more about the actual project and seeing the community. The community is the biggest testimony that this ecosystem is not going anywhere. If it's going anywhere, it's going up, right? So I would say like that really helped me, and I really think that onboards onto crypto, if they hear this message first, they're not going to become a Jeet on Solana chain and go around cheating on every single project that they come across, right? So that's just something that, from my experience, that I would say is definitely something to target, that long-term mentality, that hodler mentality, and buying the blood, right?
Makes total sense, man. I mean, I've been in crypto since 2017, and I haven't yet to find anything that compares to Hex. I started with Bitcoin, I went into Ethereum, I went into DeFi, and I'm still here. And I look at a lot of different projects. I've looked at Polkadot, I've looked at Solana, I've looked at a lot of them, and I've really evaluated a lot of the chains, and I still think this is the place to be. So I'm here.
Let's say, for example, I'm looking at this one block. This one block that's looking here is like 57 million hex was staked for 1,111 days, right? So that's going to be, once it's staked, because he staked over 3 years, 16 days, as it's longer, it's exponential. The rewards is a time commitment, right? So once it's staked, that becomes the T share. And then the T share is how much of the daily inflation pool that's earned back.
Yeah, it's a way.
So that's, it's,
Yes.
okay.
Yep. So
Okay.
basically, you would look at how many T shares you got in place of that stake, and then you could go to hex.com and look at the staking page, and it would tell you what the payout per T share per day rate was, and then you can do the math to figure out what your APY is. It also will show you on the staking page what your APY is for that stake currently. And then the idea is that if for that guy that just in your example had a 3-year stake, as long as he keeps that stake active for at least a year and a half, his principal will be safe. And if he does it for longer than that, he will retain more and more of the interest. And if he does the full length, then he'll get everything in hex
And
terms.
the more transactions that happen on Pulse,
No bearing.
the more transactions, would that not overall bring the whole ecosystem up as far as not in the rate of return of that CD, but of the coin, the chain itself, as the value goes up, as there's more interactions, right?
Yeah. I mean, that theoretically, as Pulse Chain gets more
So it'll
active,
multiply.
yeah, as well as Pulse Chain gets more active and more popular, theoretically, with the liquidity bonding and just that all the coins are made by the same founder, and people seeing the value proposition in the each of those coins, theoretically, all of those coins would appreciate in value. So as far as your rate of return, that would kind of be, that's all dictated by how many people, what percentage of the overall hex is staked versus unstaked. That's how that ratio is determined. So for example, if there was no hex staked at all, the APY is 369% a year. 369, very significant
Well,
number, right? So the reason we were always around 38% as our guesstimate was that only 10% of the hex that was out there was staked. So if you do the math on that, only 1/10 of it's staked. So instead of 369% a year APY, it was around 36.9. And then you filter in some emergency in stakes in there and whatnot, you're around 38% average APY. So that's where that number came from originally. Then what happened recently was the OA staked the vast majority of the liquid. So now instead of that APY being around 38%, because 98, 99% of it's staked, now we're down around 1.5 to close to 2% APY currently. But that's all based on that ratio of staked to unstaked. So that can oscillate. But as far as the value,
so
and
if
that's
we were
all.
to if we were to extend the ecosystem, how does like hedron and like adding leverage using a stake instead of unstaking it to be able to get liquidity using like hedron or minting one of those by leaving it still staked? How does that play out?
Yeah, I mean those are little added benefits, and that was definitely a factor in the first cycle. There was a lot of free hedron given out to people, and a lot of people sold that to buy, maybe more hex, maybe other things. I think Alex is kind of revisiting that model a bit because it was just a ton of sell pressure on hedron in the icosa ecosystem. So I mean, there's going to be other things like that kind of glom onto hex stakers because they understand the psychology behind it. A staker that they understand delayed gratification, so they might want to reward their behavior with airdrops or different
I
protocols.
just
So that stuff always happens, but I think the shorter and more direct and easier way to look at it and to frame it is if you want the price of Hex to go up, buy Hex.
Mhm.
Like all these little add-ons and all these little leverage plays and all
Well,
this other stuff that people like to talk about typically don't fare as well as the underlying asset.
well, I'm just
So
looking at it. If we were to model like traditional finance, they do, let's just say, index life insurance, right? So they lock up money for a period of time. But let's say you want liquidity. If you know your yield is going to be 20%, 30%, if I was to take a loan against yourself for like 5%, 10%, that way I have some liquidity. I don't need to hit the emergency evac button to do something like
right.
that. How does that play?
Yeah, there's things out there like that now in the Hedron ecosystem, and
Hmm.
I think he's working on a V2 of that. And then he also has another thing in the works that's basically like a mutual fund, for lack of a better explanation, where you can just have one asset that is a conglomeration of all the RH
There's
assets.
more. There's the
So
actuator protocol. Kind of fits right into what we're talking about.
Some call outs. I think in the beginning when someone was talking about eHex versus Pulse Hex, I think that's like a common pitfall for new people. Like, what is the underlying technology on the blockchain, Ethereum versus Pulse chain versus like this is like a financial thing, right? So like the separation of terminology with that would be helpful in the beginning. And also just like the comparisons of traditional finance with the modeling of what's happening in the Hex ecosystem is great too. I think the call out of like, the Fed and how they adjust rates, I think that's a really common mental model that would be easy for newcomers to think about. I think also like the OA, and when you're talking about what you're predicting might happen to the price and the dynamics that the owner of those um, stakes might affect the system. I think that and comparing it to like the market that people might understand the fluctuations and yeah, just common layman terms would be great. But otherwise, I think the information is very interesting. And thank you.
I love your feedback. Thank you so much.
I try to, like, especially with Tam's gentle redirect, I try to kind of go back to my thinking of like, what was my elevator pitch like back in the day? Like, how did I explain what Hex is to people, right? And then now we make it extra complicated because it's two chains. So then that seems a little weird. But when we can just explain to people that forks happen all the time. Have you heard of Litecoin? Well, that was a fork of Bitcoin. Well, why did they do that? Well, the developers, it was like a divorce in a family. They just didn't see eye to eye after a while. And one person wanted to live in Florida and the other was happy with Michigan, and that's the way it went. And so Litecoin and branched off from Bitcoin. Same type of deal, Ethereum Classic. There's a number of them. If you talk to people that they will recognize one of those forks, right? Doge, it's a fork of Bitcoin. So it's like those things people are going to resonate with. So then you can explain, well, Pulsechain is just a fork of Ethereum, but the difference is with our fork is we actually brought over a system state copy, which is a big word for meaning that anything that was on Ethereum blockchain is now also available on Pulsechain. There's no value with it, but the coins themselves are there, and people are going to assign them values if they choose to participate in those. And primarily the one that has the most interest, because it's Richard Hart's chain, is Hex, because that was his only token before he started Pulsechain. And he did it primarily because the gas fees on Ethereum had become so punitive. For example, and this would not be part of an elevator pitch, but just for your education, Kim, in the height of the bull market, I had a stake that probably cost me, I don't know, maybe $150 or something. And at the height of the bull market, that stake was worth $300,000. And I'm sorry, around $100,000. And I had three of them. And this is how naive I was about staking. Instead of setting them out nicely and neatly every 3 or 6 months, I had three stakes coming out back to back to back because I didn't have a clue and I just scattershot them to the wind and set my stakes out there. So I had three stakes coming out literally one day right after the other after the other. The gas fee, now I wasn't that upset because the total value was like 300 grand of those three stakes, but the gas fee on each one to end them was $1,500 in Ethereum. So imagine if it was someone that had maybe had a shorter stake, or the stake wasn't as large as mine was, and it was only worth $1,000. And then all of a sudden, because it's based on the time length of the stake, not necessarily the size of it, the gas fee, it was there was nothing you could do with it. The
It
gas
was
was going to cost you more.
paralysis.
Yeah, the gas would cost you more than the value of the stake. So it made no sense to even do it. So Richard's like, this is bullshit. This can't continue. We've got to find a solution. I'm going to fork Ethereum. So that's what he did. And then he thought, hey, I'm not just going to fork Ethereum and then somehow bring Hex over. I'm bringing
Major improvements.
all, yeah, I'm going to bring everything over. So then
Hmm.
that was kind of the original thrust of like, hey, the biggest airdrop in history, because you're going to get all the ERC20s now over on Pulse Chain. Come over and trade them. Do what you want to do with them. Pair them up with your Ethereum counterpart. Do what you want to do. Now we've seen the pitfalls of that, but that's a deeper discussion for another time. But primarily to your point of EHEX, PHEX confusion, that gives you a little idea of why Pulse Chain even exists. And then basically, not basically, exactly, just except where it runs. The only difference is one runs on the Ethereum chain and one runs on Pulse Chain. They are the exact same code. And everybody that had Hex, staked or otherwise, on May 13th, 2023, when Pulse Chain launched, got a copy on Pulse Chain. So Richard being, a little bit egomaniacal. Typically, when there's something that goes from one chain to another, you put like a small, like it should have been like a small p on front of all the tokens. So it would have been p hex, and then big HEX over on Ethereum was the original hex. But he was like, no, we're not going to do that. Anything that's still over on Ethereum, we're just going to throw a little E on the front of it, and that's Ethereum hex. The real hex is over here on Pulse Chain. The real wrapped Bitcoin is over here on Pulse Chain. The real Chainlink is over here on Pulse Chain. But the broader
But
theme
one of
here
the
is that they're
things,
the same.
if I
Yeah,
may, is just
sure.
if you look up like the network state, the idea that you can create a nation of people without actual land in the digital space, it's based off of Ethereum, and Ethereum is slow, clunky, expensive. Pulsechain is everything that network state can become. The dream of it, because it's cheap, it's fast, it's nimble, but because it's not centralized, it is free, and you have to learn a little bit about how to get onto the tree. And that's really the power of it. The more you learn, the more powerful you have, and nobody can take it from you, not even the SEC, which we already saw.
Did that help at all, or did I make it worse?
No, it really helped, but I think from a newcomer, I don't think that's like relevant at all, right? They should be really thinking about hex on pulse chain, period, right? Like that's only relevant if you held e hex before the copy, right? And
Well,
then you ran a
yes,
fork.
yes, and no. There's arguments here, and there's a giant debate in the community, and has been forever. Which is the real hex? Which one's better? Here's the deal that I have found from onboarding literally millions of dollars worth of investment into the RH ecosystem, my own included, but like many, many, many onboards over the course of I mean, I've been in since before the beginning. And so Hex on Ethereum, my experience has been the vast majority of no coiners, because they're familiar with Ethereum, they know Bitcoin and they know Ethereum. They are more comfortable with it. It is easier for them to just say, hey, I've already got a Coinbase account. Now what do I do? And then I say, okay, you do have MetaMask. What's your browser wallet of choice? What do you prefer? Definitely please get a hardware wallet. I go through that with them. Go to Coinbase, bring over some USDC and some Ethereum for gas into your MetaMask wallet that is treasured. Then from there, what you're going to need to do is go to Uniswap or 1inch or preferred DEX, and then buy with your USDC, buy some EHEX. That's step one, and that's the easiest and the most comfortable for most no coiners. So that's been my experience. And then I'll tell them, hey, but for cheaper and faster and a lot more, community support long term, probably is over on Pulse Chain. And then I go through that explanation, and I end up hitting a wall with probably 85% of them. And they're like, well, hey, well, okay, this is far enough. How about I just start with some EHEX and see how that goes for a while and get comfortable with it. And then there's this percentage of people that they get excited and they start to learn and they start to understand. They're like, okay, now what? Now how do I go over and get the Pulse Chain stuff? And then I can go in and explain, okay, now here's how you bridge it over across, bridge some of that USDC across that you didn't already spend on EHEX. And now you can go over here and play, and you can buy some, and you're going to need some Pulse. So you can, and I go through the whole process of like how to participate on Pulse Chain. But, in a real world, example for me, now maybe it's different for other people because they're bringing them in through other means like OX Coast that can bring you directly from fiat into Pulse Chain, which is a great way in. Internet money is a great way in, but for smaller amounts of money, that seems to work well because you can do it with credit card and stuff. I'm not sure what the limits are or what the fees are, if that might be less attractive than something like OX Coast or just your traditional route of like Coinbase or Binance or Kraken, and then to your MetaMask wallet, and then in and over the bridge. So yeah, so it gets a little circuitous when you try to get people all the way over to Pulsechain when they're no coiners. If they're already in crypto, it's no big deal. I get it. They understand bridges. They kind of understand that that's part of the game. So it depends on who your onboard is how you frame it and what your expectation should be as an educator of where you might hit some roadblocks.
Well, I guess for someone that isn't already in Ethereum, I think that to me, it was only a couple extra steps for swapping, right? It seemed like,
Not that hard.
yeah, it didn't seem like much of a logic jump here, right? I already did all this work with Coinbase or whatever before. It's just moving some more stuff.
But Kim, you are young and you are smart and you have a big juicy brain. I'm a Gen Xer and most of my onboards are my age or older. The guys that were coming in with, 6 figures plus, and they were very hesitant and it was a lot for those guys. So it's like, yeah, it's like of a certain generation, Pulsechain is not a hard stretch.
But I guess, do you want to
Yeah.
start there when you're here right now? Like that could, like, not
That
saying
yeah,
that we'd exclude them, but like at
Yeah,
that stage.
that's like I think probably a good way to do it is maybe just shorten up the history and just and focus more on Pulse Chain, and then if the question comes up of like, well, what's the like kind of like Kareem earlier, he was asking about the differences and literally thought the staking on Ethereum worked differently than it did on Pulse Chain. So it's good to clarify those things, but maybe just spitball in here maybe as they come up, address them, and then just do it in such a way that it's concise as can be, so they understand why there are two hexes, and then the benefits of Pulse Chain, and the other things that are available to you there, PulseX, Inc., Pulse itself, and Hex, of course, over on Pulse Chain, and all the benefits that affords.
Yeah, I think for like a beginner, it's just like, let me learn the basics. And there's already a lot with like Hex versus Pulse versus, all the coins. And a lot of the intricate stuff is on Hex. So if it like, for just your first time, what is the standard tutorial, right? You get that when you're onboarding any, complex system.
That makes sense. It's like, just basically just a step by step, like pretty much a tutorial, right? And it's like, and there's plenty of them out there. Crypto Coffee has some great ones. Hexo did one years ago that was literally he had his baby like moving the mouse and clicking and stuff to show how easy it was. And that was like the whole Coinbase in through MetaMask route and how easy it was to buy. Those type of things I think are great because they're evergreen. And then, just with some little tweaks to add the Pulse Chain element, can be a 45-second clip, of a tutorial that gets you there. And then once you're in, it's like, then, that's part of DeFi, right? Do your own research, not financial advice. Like you need to go in there and educate yourself because the thing that always irritate me is if people came and are like, well, just tell me what button to push to get rich. It's like, and that's to me, I can't do that because to me, that's not prudent, right? It's like they need to be educated to a certain degree and want to learn more about it because ultimately it's their money that's at stake. And I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know which one of these is going to do what. Crypto is incredibly complicated behind the scenes. It's amazing that any of it works at all. So, yeah, to your point, I think if there's just like if we can find a way to make it more concise, obviously there's generational things here. I'm in my 50s, so the way I communicate might be different than someone in their 30s or 20s. That's going to resonate with them. So that's what I love about the community being so broad. Men, women, all age groups, to be able to bring other things to the table that's going to help it be digestible and interesting for people to want to learn enough to participate. So yeah, I think just to focus on. Hex is like a CD on the blockchain. You don't need to talk about whether it's on eHex or pHex or whatever. Just if someone wants to know what Hex is, that's the simplest way I've been able to describe it, right? You stake it for a certain period of time, you earn a certain amount of interest for the length of the stake, and there's penalties if you try to end it early. Ta-da. And that's it. Next, Pulse is like Ethereum. That's the gas token of the chain. PulseX is the DEX, which DEX is short for decentralized exchange. So instead of like Coinbase, it's a centralized exchange. This is an exchange that's solely online that you interact with, and there's no middlemen. So you're going and using that interface to make your transactions. PulseX in particular has these buy and burn mechanisms, so you can explain that if you want to go into PulseX mechanics a little more, to further that conversation.